Now, as we go into sudden death overtime here, Richard Wolff, the question I wanted to ask you, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez recently said that every billionaire is a policy failure. And A, do you agree with that statement? And B, if so, which policies are failing us?
Yes, I agree with the statement, but I suspect I probably disagree with the analytics behind it. Maybe not, but let me explain. And let me do it as follows. Let me tell you what I would worry about if it were the policy that led to that statement. Much of the left, center left and left in the United States has focused for at least the last half century, if not longer, on dealing with problems like inequality, which is what the comment about a billionaire is pointing to, dealing with problems of inequality by proposing one or another mode of redistributing wealth. By that I mean, for example, that a billionaire is a billionaire because the taxes are so set up in our country that you can become a billionaire, and with your billions you can make more billions. And the approach of a critic of this sort of billionaire is to say we ought to have a different policy, one that is more taxing of people's incomes, because that would redistribute, it would take the money away from those who have more than, say, $1 billion and redistribute it to people who have much less. That's a redistributive policy. Here's another one. When you die, in most societies, the government comes in and takes a portion of what you leave behind when you die. It's called an inheritance tax or estate tax. And the idea is you want a society that more or less has everyone starting from an equal basis, so that your talents and your hard work shape your income rather than the accident of your birth and what is left to you by people who have passed on. And in other words, you can't have an equal opportunity if some people start with $1 billion and other people start with debts. I mean, this is not a rocket science difficulty here. And so there's an estate tax that redistributes wealth from those who have a great deal when they die to those who don't. Okay. Then there are other proposals. There are proposals out of religious communities for something called Jubilee.
Right.
At least I think in the Christian religion it's called Jubilee. In any case, it's an idea that periodically, and some religions want to do it every 20 years, and some every 50 years, and some every 100 years, where you kind of take the property in a society away from all the individuals who have it, and you kind of shuffle the cards, and you redistribute land and other resources so that whoever had a lot of it the first time, gets less of it the second time, and the people who didn't have it the first time get a bit more of it, or some, and there are various recipes for how to do this. This is, again, redistribution. I don't like any of these, and I tell you why. It seems to me that redistribution in a society is a little bit like the following metaphorical situation. You are taking your little nephew and your little niece, who are both 7 years old, to the park. And while you're at the park, you encounter a gentleman with a little cart who's selling ice cream. And so you say to the gentleman, please give me 2 ice cream cones, which he then prepares and hands to you. You pay for them, and you now turn around and give the 2 ice cream cones, just for the sake of argument, to your niece. She is pleased as punch. She holds 1 ice cream cone in her left hand, 1 ice cream cone in her right hand, and begins to enjoy them. At this point, your nephew, standing and looking at all of this, begins to howl. Why? He doesn't have any ice cream. You say, oh my goodness, that's not fair that the niece has 2 and the nephew has none. So you propose here we go, redistribution of the wealth. You reach towards one of the ice cream cones clutched by your niece, and you begin to pull at it, explaining to her that you're going to give it to her brother, the young man who is howling and hungry. She doesn't want to do without it because she's licked it a couple times. It tastes wonderful, and she does not want to do without this sort of situation. A fight ensues. She begins to develop arguments about why she worked harder, or she's hungrier, or her body is growing faster, or whatever she can think of, because you're depriving her of something she began to think of as her own. What's the lesson here? By the way, a lesson every parent learns if they didn't know it before they had children, which is it is much better to distribute equally in the first place than to destroy relationships by trying to redistribute what you shouldn't have distributed unequally in the first place. Better parenting would never have done that. If all the parents can think about is how to get the cone out of the niece's hand into the nephew's, they haven't learned the right lesson. The right lesson is you shouldn't be worried about how best to redistribute. You should distribute equally from the beginning. And for me, that is the advice I would give. Capitalism constantly produces and reproduces horrific social struggles over redistribution because its structure distributes unfairly and unequally in the first place. If there are 100 people working in an enterprise, it is unfair to give each of them the minimum wage while the employer lives in the nicest part of town, in a very big house, has tutors for his children, goes on vacation to Europe. You get the picture. That produces bitterness, tension, envy, jealousy. You can see where it goes. It leads those at the top to tell themselves that the folks at the bottom are somehow inferior. It takes those at the bottom who feel bad about themselves, or those at the bottom who become violent in their anger, etc., etc. Capitalism suffers from the redistribution struggles for which it is in fact responsible. If you had what I prefer, worker co-ops as the way we organize enterprises, worker co-op factory, worker co-op office, worker co-op store. And if the workers together, one person, one vote, decided how to distribute whatever wealth the enterprise creates, I'm confident they would never give one person a Jeffrey Z. I can't get away from the fellow.
Bezos, yeah.
No, I don't want to pick on him particularly, but to give one person millions of dollars while everybody else is worried about the next meal, is worried about getting the money for their child's education, et cetera, et cetera. People wouldn't do it. It wouldn't succeed in a democratic arrangement. Doesn't mean everybody would get the exact same amount, not at all. But it would be a democratic decision that everybody would have a chance to contribute to as to how you distribute. Then you would not get the bitter, socially divisive redistribution struggles that you have now. It's a lesson that capitalism should have learned long ago, but it can't because its own structure undermines it.
So the term is sometimes used predistribution, not redistribution. Is that?
Right.
Yeah.
Not so much. Again, I want to get away from. Well, yes, that'd be okay. What I'm after is there's nothing written in stone or in cement, or for that matter in the Bible, about how you distribute the product of a lot of people's labor. Everybody, pick an enterprise. Everybody works at that enterprise. Every employee plays his or her role in keeping the records, in cleaning the machines, in moving the produce, in selling the output. There's all the different tasks that have to be performed. And together, they produce a certain output, a certain profit, a certain net revenue. It's very hard to measure exactly what each person did, because what you do played a role in how I could do my job, and how I did mine shaped the difficulty faced by yet another person. So we are interdependent. So the question of how we divide the output cannot be in any simple way, you get this because you did this much. No, what you did is woven together with what the other one did. You made the other one more productive. And how do we apportion that? So my guess is people would say, hey, let's not spend time splitting hairs over who did how much. Why don't we distribute what we produce in our enterprise in a way that seems fair and reasonable to a majority of us? That is fair in terms of the effort you've made, fair in terms of the needs you have, and let's struggle over that. I think, for example, that someone who has 5 children at home gets to get a consideration different from the one who has 2.
Right.
That's part of my sense of what a community does for one another. It's like getting up in the subway when there's a pregnant woman there so that she can sit down, or an elderly person. These are the things we do to give a good moment to one another, which together adds up to a good life. I want that to be going on in the enterprise. I think the resulting distribution would make it unnecessary to rip ourselves apart in the way that little niece and that little nephew did over the ice cream cones.
Well, I think that's extremely well said. And if anyone listening thought that the moral of the story was going to be that the niece clearly had superior ice cream cone eating skills, and therefore in a just society she deserved both, you really need to re-examine your values. So we will leave it. We will have to leave it there. But Richard Wolff, as always, great talking to you, and thank you so much.
My pleasure, and thank you for producing a program that raises these kinds of conversations. It's a valuable social service.
I appreciate that. Thanks again.